the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast, a monthly podcast devoted to the groundwater industry produced by the National Groundwater Association. I'm your host, Mike Price, and today we're joined by Bill Alley, Director of Science and Technology for NGWA. We're going to talk with him about interpreting groundwater studies, the latest on PFAS regulations, and more. Welcome to the fourth episode of the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast, a monthly podcast devoted to the groundwater industry. I'm Mike Price, Senior Editor of the National Groundwater Association's Waterwell Journal Trade Magazine, and today I'm with Bill Alley, who holds a Ph.D. and is Director of Science and Technology for NGWA. Welcome, Bill, to the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. Before we begin, can you introduce yourself to everyone and explain what you do in your role with NGWA and your industry background?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the Director of Science and Technology for the National Groundwater Association. Basically, I'm the science guy on staff, and I work part-time for NGWA in that role. And I previously worked for the U.S. Geological Survey for about 35 years, I think. So when I retired from USGS, I knew a lot about NGWA and was offered a chance to be the Director of Science and Technology, and took it and have enjoyed it ever since. I've been doing it for about 10 years, I think now, even a little bit more.
We're grateful to have you on staff here, as you're a wealth of knowledge. And let's jump into the first question we have for you. Let's start with how groundwater contractor professionals can interpret the increasing number of studies and articles pertaining to groundwater levels that seem to be increasing in recent years, many of which have the articles that anyway have an alarmist tone to them. How should contractors be interpreting these studies and articles that are on the rise?
Yeah, they seem, particularly the New York Times, I think it's caught people's attention with articles like America is using up groundwater like there's no tomorrow, and tangible rules to protect America's water is falling short. So you get the idea right off the bat there.
Yes.
These groundwater depletion and quality is a serious issue exacerbated by climate change, but the articles are clearly sensational. So I guess good news is they're drawing people's attention to groundwater. The bad, and I'm not sure how much people carry away from these kinds of articles anyway. But I have three issues with them really. One is that by focusing solely on groundwater as a crisis, the articles miss an opportunity to raise awareness about the role of groundwater in many respects, and in climate adaptation, among others, and actions that can lead to more sustainable and resilient groundwater future. There could be, just like there's examples of groundwater overexploitation, there are many good examples of good groundwater management, and it would be good to highlight those. Second is that they haven't discovered anything new here. So the presentations are well known to most hydrologists, and there is an increased availability of sort of global perspectives on groundwater. There's a lot of research, a lot of articles in journals also. And the gray satellites have certainly raised the profile of groundwater depletion worldwide. The gray satellites measure from the sky gravity changes, which are mostly due to groundwater changes. The third is that they imply the need for more federal regulations. I think the second one I mentioned there. And, so safeguarding groundwater is a global challenge, but the primary solutions are found at the local and aquifer groundwater basin level. I think that's something our members should definitely emphasize, just how different these areas are, and really where they require individualized attention, and where effective groundwater management has typically happened where there's been active participation of groundwater users and stakeholders in planning the decision-making process. And that's something which I would certainly encourage our members to participate in. those kinds of activities. They can be long and drawn out and so on, but it seems to be the way these things play out is sort of more of a stakeholder engagement, and you can't do that at the national level. Interestingly, I guess the fourth issue is one of them they say that groundwater is so poorly understood Is one of the problems why it has been left largely to the states and locals, which is completely wrong. That the idea that groundwater is secret, occult, and concealed, dates back to an 1861 court case, actually in Ohio. There, lasted on the books for quite a while. We've moved a long ways from that. We have a very good understanding of groundwater these days amongst a community of groundwater professionals. Finally, I will say one thing: they do emphasize the importance of data, which is good. The importance of groundwater data. So, they keep coming. So we'll see. We've had a fair number of them in the New York Times.
Yes. And do you have any recommendations on, sources that you go to for contractors to be aware of for solid, objective?
Yeah. So I think some of the things that we present on our website and that are available from USGS is generally, a little biased there maybe, but generally objective analyses. And then in your local state, lots of times the state agencies have good information. So there's no lack of information out there about groundwater, as far as I can tell.
Right. Okay. And moving to PFAS, which has been in the news quite a bit as of late. This is in May. We're going to be talking about PFAS here, but NGWA recently hosted the Groundwater in the PFAS Era Stressors, Protection, and Compliance Conference in mid-April. And you were at the conference, Bill. Can you share anything that groundwater professionals should know from the conference before you tell us about the implications for the groundwater industry regarding the latest news on PFAS regulation?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very well attended conference. We held it in Tucson because the university there actually has some excellent people on, and we had a lot of student involvement, which was very nice. I'm still trying to find somebody that thinks that the extremely low 4 parts per trillion makes any sense regulation for PFOS and PFAS, because it just seems so, particularly when you give PFAS actually arises from many others. You're exposed to it in many other ways than from just drinking water. In fact, drinking water could be lesser than some other exposure routes. So it is a serious issue. There's a plethora of regulations from not just the drinking water regulations, but related to CERCLA in terms of the same week, I think, that the MCLs came out, the PFOA and PFOS were identified as hazardous substances in CERCLA or Superfund, which means that you could actually have to reopen cases, close Superfund sites to address those two particular contaminants. So and then there's a lot of activity on wastewater treatment plants as sources of PFAS, biosolids. We have a huge biosolid industry, which is actually very good. It's providing fertilizer for many farms around the country. That was an interesting issue we discussed in Tucson, and there's been some studies have shown that things get kind of hung up in the unsaturated zone, a lot of the PFAS chemicals, just by their nature as surfactants. So that's the background there.
Can I interject?
Sure.
With regard to CERCLA or the Superfund law, so reopening cases, that naturally leads to potential more work for our members in some regards.
Yes, I would say yes. So a lot of the cleanup activities, certainly the issue of aqueous film forming foam, AFFF, which are many Air Force bases, naval bases, even airports have used training with unlined ditches, unbeknownst to them. I think just this year, at some point, PFAS is going to be, AFFF with fluorinated compounds in it is going to be banned, or having to have a certain very low concentration without exception by the Secretary of Defense or something like that.
Right.
But there's all those those contaminants are out there, and those are the ones a lot of our members would naturally be facing because of the nearby, oftentimes the rural area, or a lot of people in private wells around those particular
Right.
sites. Yeah.
And just secondly, just to clarify, not to minimize PFAS, but you said drinking water could be not as harmful as other sources of PFAS. Can you, I know, um, uh, receipts at grocery stores, that's a source of PFAS. It's everywhere. Can you share just a few sources
Sure.
that are
It's
mindful
in everything. It's in floss currently, dental floss. I just flossed my teeth for this. Expose myself, perhaps. Um, but also, some of it's interesting. It's in ski wax.
Really?
Somebody in a laboratory. Actually, we had a story from somebody in one of the laboratories that analyzed it's for PFAS that somebody had skier contaminated their lab, that they had to clean it up because I don't know how the PFAS got around the lab, but anyway, because they were a skier and ski
Okay.
wax. It's in,
Mm.
it's very useful for things that are, water. It's water resistant, fire resistant, um, oils that don't. And so because it's a surfactant, it has a lot of properties. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Of course, Scotchgard for furniture, and all those things get thrown in the wastewater treatment plant and then pop out at the end of into the river or wherever they're discharging
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
their recycled waste.
Right. Right. So, and just to be clear too, well, the PFAS drinking water standard, it does not pertain to residential wells. We as an association recommend
Right,
well owners to test and treat their water well systems for PFAS.
right. And we have a PFAS task group within NGWA, fairly active. And I certainly welcome anybody on the line here to just contact me, and I can plug you into it. We meet about little more than maybe every 5 weeks or so. And one of the tasks we help NGWA craft their comment on PFAS legislation, and we also produce documents, and a couple I might emphasize, and you can find these at the NGWA PFAS site, would be one is on PFAS and private well owners, what you need to know, and the second one is sort of the PFAS, the truth about private water wells, that was put together by a group, and both of those are recent enough that they really haven't been circumvented by the rapidly declining standards out there,
Mm.
because we've gone from literally a couple hundred parts per trillion down to 4 over a process of maybe 12 years or so in terms of what's considered safe. Yeah, so I would recommend both of those documents to people that are interested. And they have some links to other information that the EPA has and so forth.
Great. Yeah. And for contractors to know about PFAS, that is a good start there at our ngwa.org/PFAS site for information and to know for themselves and to share with customers. So to look back at the conference, any nuggets of information that came out of the conference that you'd like to share, or anything in this front that you're tracking moving forward?
Well, we have a lot of people that are working on this issue.
Yeah.
So we had people from all over the country. I would say, there's a lot of emphasis on testing and treatment for PFAS. So from our point of view, particularly for private wells, testing is, testing for PFAS is one of many reasons to sample your well water. We emphasize things like nutrients and so forth as a regular type, maintain taking care of your well. Um, uh, and the PFAS is a little trickier though, because with such low levels, we actually changed our guidance to be emphasizing that you really want a qualified professional to collect that sample with 4 parts per trillion being the reporting level. And county and town health departments may have information on PFAS sampling and locating a laboratory that's certified to test water. One of the issues came up is, do we have enough laboratories to make all the tests that are going to be coming forward? Not just because there's a whole range of PFAS beyond just PFOA and PFOS, and they keep growing in number. There's literally thousands of PFAS compounds out there. So I think that's some of the guidance we have in terms of looking for particularly if you have water treatment systems, you want them to have third-party product certification by NSF, ANSI, and so forth, so you know that they work. A lot of emphasis on treatment. There's a lot of emphasis on destruction.
Right.
Because when you treat, you've got things you've got to dispose of. You've got a reverse osmosis system. You got to clean it up, to dispose of it somehow. That's not easy. In fact, it's very energy intensive, which actually raised the issue. A couple people raised the issue of, is there a trade-off here between putting more CO2 in the air and cleaning up PFAS?
Oh, that is a good question to debate.
Yeah. So we had a fair number of talks on a range of topics. And biosolids, I mentioned, is another really hot topic these days.
Yeah.
And the wastewater treatment plants as a source is a key topic.
And one of your concerns you've raised too is the cost for small groundwater systems, the cost
right.
of
right. So EPA, as part of this announcement of the PFOA, of the drinking water standards, set aside has $1 billion for public water systems. But we push the issue whenever we can on the need for support of private well owners.
Yeah.
Support the states and others to help them with this, with that task. Yeah. But it shouldn't be on them. And that's part of the 2 fact sheets I mentioned, or one's a fact sheet, one's a position paper. We emphasize that quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, PFAS will certainly be a talking point at this May's fly-in in Washington D.C. for NGWA.
Yeah, and that's a great opportunity, I think, to carry that message forward. Yeah.
Yep. And just lastly, to kind of put a bow on PFAS, for the 3/4 of the nation's community water systems that are groundwater supplied, with regard to the PFAS standard, I mean, they have a ramp up time. There's 3 years to get in compliance, if I read that.
They actually changed that. That's the standard, is 3 years. But in this particular case, one thing EPA did do is it set it at 5.
5. So
they have 3 years. I don't recall, like, they have to come up with something in 3 years, but they don't have to actually implement everything. They don't have to meet the standards.
Okay.
In 5 years. So recognizing that this is a major undertaking for these for public water systems to meet those standards.
Right. Okay. So we've talked about what contractors should know and about PFAS. Emerging contaminant microplastics, is that something to be aware of, or are there any other emerging contaminants maybe to be mindful of in the now and in the near future, and ways to answer any potential questions from customers on these?
Well, first of all, I'd say there's still the legacy. The contaminants we've been dealing with all along are still there.
Okay, right.
Some of those that are still hot issues are like out in California, 1,2,3 TCP, which is a nematode. California has like a 5. They have a very, very low standard for it. I don't remember exactly what it is, but we've got a lot of those kinds of contaminants out there that we still have to. We don't want to lose sight of in the process. Overemphasizing PFAS. The microplastics is an interesting one. It's an emerging. I would put it. It's still emerging. It's hard to. There's no real scientific consensus that I'm aware of the hazard presented, of the impacts of micro, and they even have nanoplastics now. People have now analyzed people's plastic water bottles, and they have all these little, very, very, very tiny um, pieces of plastic. Maybe it's another reason for drinking groundwater. I don't know. It seems like it's harder for microplastics to find their way into groundwater systems. That could be proven wrong someday. But we actually have a series that we're doing on. We're going to start up on problematic contaminants other than PFAS in our webinar series as our plans. And the first one I think we're going to end up tackling early on. We already have identified a couple of individuals is on microplastics.
Okay.
There was quite a lengthy article on it in the Groundwater Monitoring and Remediation Journal, not too long, maybe the last issue, which is kind of interesting. People might want to look at that. It's a long article. But
and speaking of reviewing things, that's part of your job, is reviewing submissions for the Science and Engineering Forum at Groundwater Week. So this is kind of a busy time for you with abstracts coming in.
I got abstracts through our Fractured Rock conference from Sue just last Friday.
My goodness.
We drank 43 there, plus 4 posters. We had 12 2 days before the end of the call for papers, and then they shot up to 42. So we slept better after that. Yeah, I do. I get to review all the abstracts and things like that. I enjoy that aspect.
I was going to ask if that's one of your favorite parts of the job.
Yeah, I don't do them all at one day. I do them little bits. Yeah, you get a little time, and you do a few here, a few there. But get the job done in time.
Well, then let's wrap up with. So NGWA has like four priority issues that they monitor, and 2 of which are groundwater sustainability and managed aquifer recharge, or MAR. Can you give us an update on what NGWA is currently working on regarding these 2 priority issues?
Sure. I would say we're not really doing anything special, especially connected to the groundwater sustainability issue, other than we promote in many, many ways the development and use of groundwater in a manner that can be maintained for an indefinite time without causing unacceptable environmental and socioeconomic consequences, which is what groundwater sustainability basically is. So many of our activities involve groundwater sustainability, but it's not a thrust. MAR is a very active. Managed aquifer recharge is a very active thrust. We have an active task group on that topic also. Basically MAR's purposeful recharge of aquifers for later recovery when needed or for environmental benefits. So it's a growing approach worldwide. And there's a variety of sources of water, including stormwater and treated wastewater, that can be used for recharge. A variety of recharge methods, wells and infiltration basins, but riverbank filtration, putting wells along the bank of a river and using the groundwater as a pre-treatment. Our group tries to identify and who do you contact in different states. We have we meet monthly and separately on different issues. The group's been updating NGWA fact sheets and white papers and so forth to include more mention of managed aquifer recharge.
Okay.
And we're also been updating we have an ASR aquifer storage and recovery best suggested practices document. So we're updating that. That's pretty well done. Sort of began recently one on surface infiltration. So surface infiltration best suggested practices. There was a special issue of groundwater in 2022, I think. And we had a conference in San Antonio, Texas, which is another popular conference last year. We plan another conference to be determined where for next fall. We focus on some special issues of concern, like one is viruses. We're not so sure that there's enough support for the current rules on viruses, essentially residence time in groundwater systems. We're having a webinar on that. All members, it's free for all you NGWA members on June 20th.
Great.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of activity on the MAR front.
Mm-hmm. And you're also a book author. You humble in the intro, you didn't mention that. Of course, you've got two of your books in our bookstore: The Water Recycling Revolution and High and Dry, that relate to groundwater sustainability, among other topics. So are you eyeing to write any other books in the near future, Bill?
Yeah, we always have something on the burner. My wife is a non-scientist, and so she helps make it understandable for the readers. We're actually thinking about one on managed after recharge. We've been toying with around the world, actually.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's a part-time activity.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps me intellectually stimulated and keeps her able to correct and make what I have to say a lot more easily understandable.
Well, we appreciate those books, and those are available in our bookstore at ngwa.org/bookstore. And also, as Bill mentioned, the MAR resources. We have a plethora of solid online resources on ngwa.org. So, well, thanks, Bill, for your time and knowledge today. Really appreciate you sharing it with us today.
Yeah, great to talk with you, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast. We'll be back next month with a brand new episode, so be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the major platforms, so it will be easy to find us. And visit waterwelljournal.com for the latest expert columns, feature articles, videos, and news covering the groundwater industry. So one more time, for Bill and I, thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.